fire it up.
Good afternoon, Tex.
Oh, man, we're recording this later than usual. Good afternoon, Luke.
John,
How are you?
how do you do?
I do well, thank you.
We all do well. That's what we do.
Yeah, we don't just do good, we do well.
That's right. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for another episode of The Crew on Power Athlete Radio, which is, for the uninitiated, I was going to go indoctrinated.
Well, do we indoctrinate people when they come in?
I'm not sure.
I mean, what we
What's
do
the
with the block
difference?
ones.
That's fact. What's an indoctrination versus initiation?
I think to indoctrinate is somebody when you present your doctrine and they're bought in on, really just more than just the verbal. You've engaged them in such a way that you've indoctrinated them into your community and your mindset.
So it's like a gang when you beat someone up.
Simply put, teaching instruction or the process of teaching a person or group to accept a set of beliefs uncritically.
You will believe this uncritically, ladies and gentlemen. The premier podcast on strength and conditioning.
I will not be indoctrinated into this.
You already have been.
No, I haven't. I will fight against indoctrination.
I indoctrinate you. You've been indoctrinated.
What was the other one? Initiation.
Dude, if you guys come in with t-shirts with Che Guevara on them, we're having problems.
Okay. But what if it's...
What about hacky sax? Man.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, man.
Man.
Oh, I know that guy. He's a nihilist.
Yeah. Press stone. He wears t-shirts and he has hair.
What does the Google internet say about initiation?
It includes a blindfold.
And a paddle.
So technically, as long as everybody puts a blindfold on now and listens to this, then they're
technically
initiated.
Are podcast downloads that are listening only
Because they can't see
they're
us.
initiated because they are
But those
basically
who are
blindfolded.
watching on YouTube
Okay.
are indoctrinated.
Yes.
Before this goes
This is important.
before this goes to the road of ridiculousness,
How has it not already?
how about we indoctrinate our listeners with a question so that we can break off a little bit of knowledge?
But where are we going to find a question to answer?
I heard that there's a hotline that's extra hot that Power Athlete Radio has.
That's right.
That people come in and they leave questions. I like to refer to it as the modern 2020 Oracle at Delphi.
Yes.
Where people show up, they want to know what the minds think, what the spirits are going to tell them, and they leave that question, much like a offering at the Oracle at Delphi.
Is that a search engine?
That was actually in Greek.
Yeah,
times.
300.
So in the movie, there was a oracle at Delphi, and what would happen is people would come and they would ask for advice, or hey, like I have this issue, or I need you to answer, and the priest would take some money, and
Yeah,
then
they
would
get a bunch of gold coins,
and then
right?
they would take these chicks that were like
What do they call
proxies.
them? Yeah.
And there was the reason that it was there was some form of like cavern, and these gases would come up and make them have visions and other crazy stuff, and then they would whisper the secrets to the priest who would come out and tell you. And so that was like you'd go to the Oracle of Delphi, and that's would help you connect to the gods to give information.
You know the scene in 300, right? Like he climbs the mountains,
Yeah,
gets the creature to
that wasn't
get that
in-
hot babe to do her thing.
Same deal, but that wasn't in Delphi. That was in Sparta, which Delphi, I believe, was not in Sparta.
If I was into tech, I would name my search engine that, but that's just me.
And you're not into tech, number one. Number two is... John,
Oracle's already been taken, and Delphi has already been taken too. So
No, but not them together.
yeah, they frown upon that stuff.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it just so happens that you can reach the Oracle at 929-464-4640. I get it mixed up because of
we
the
have
949 area code.
Can I read a wonderful
No,
iTunes review?
Absolutely not. Not at this moment, Tex. There's the second part of the number, which is like
Well, the
best
iTunes
part.
review got it wrong.
929-ing.
0.
That's right. Okay, now
All right,
Tex, you are
Tex.
clear.
Yeah. Tee it up. Let's give this iTunes.
For our loyal
review.
listeners out there, if you may or may not be aware, we host this podcast on Spotify, on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Player FM, on Google Podcasts, everywhere.
And if you really look to the distance, you can probably see smoke signals.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We do put every word of this podcast up in the air in Morse code smoke signals. But if you are a loyal listener and you find that you have been indoctrinated and benefited from the information that we share with you today, then the best place to let us know isn't necessarily on social media, although
It's a review.
It's leave us a review like this one.
Great choice of words, because this reviewer was actually indoctrinated. This is from Rich No Cramps. If you recall our episode on cramps, he's very grateful and left us this review. Simply the Best is the title. Listen to this podcast if you want to learn, laugh, be entertained, or just spend time hanging out with a great group of people. Come for the face-melting amounts of knowledge and expertise about strength and conditioning, health, nutrition, and training. Examples of this include episodes 384 and 408. Stay for pure entertainment, like episode 390 or any crew episode. And incredible guests with an amazing array of topics. Really too many lists, but check out the recent episode 321, 326, 334, 337, 365, 377, 380.
1,
All
2, 3.
All of this is seasoned with the best banter around and doses of movie references. They also provide the best workout programming you can find anywhere.
Preach.
Whatever you're training for.
Amen.
And it doesn't stop there. If you call, and I have to correct the number because he got it wrong.
So some poor assholes getting these voicemails.
Yeah. I don't know what area code 969 is, but 929-464-4640. You can leave a message and the crew will answer your question on a podcast. Give them a listen.
Hey, snaps to that. Am I right?
Yeah, he's good. It's nice.
Snaps to that.
no
What's nice
cramps.
about that review is
I'm not buying into your snaps thing after going to BirthFit.
no, I
Remember we
want
went
snaps to BirthFit.
No, so when we went to that BirthFit symposium deal, instead of clapping, they were all snapping, and I was like,
that would be uncomfortable.
I was like, this is weird.
I
They
remember-
also hissed when I accidentally cut the line in the bathroom. Who knew the men's room was also like doubling down as...
Well, you never know what somebody's plumbing is in that event.
Yeah,
I mean,
dude.
I messed it up when I referred to that dude who wasn't
yeah.
really a dude, but
You're up next, bro.
I'm a chick.
yeah.
The
I got a big JJ.
I've brought the snaps to the certs once. Like, did we ever work ones right? Like that was
feel-
one of my gimmicks. Like if it was
feel
just
I
like
have.
I'm
a
so
dull
glad I wasn't
group-
there.
Like a dull group of real what would you
Snicker
call
eaters?
them? Yeah, no, Snicker eaters did not get the snaps. You selfish sons of bitches, just bathing on black sand beach in New Zealand while I'm
You were-
over there with the Snickers eater.
In Nevada.
Henderson, Nevada. Just long enough, like far enough away you can barely see the strip, and like way too far to go for like an In-N-Out.
Oh, God.
Not In-N-Out burger, although that would have been nice.
God
but
damn.
with old Levi.
I'll tell you this, like
Levi, and after day one, John,
he just left.
no, we went. I wish, but we went. We went to like the local Fridays and got martinis. Like me and Levi drinking dirty martinis because we were so fired up from the Snickers girl.
I had a TGI
And
Friday.
TGI Fridays
That might
in Nevada.
I would say that might be the low point in your life, but I know you, and I know you've had lower points than this.
Oh yes, much lower. But I would say on the cert, like in that lane of life, I think that is one of the lower points.
And Tex and I went to a restaurant that served black mussels that they had caught like 50 feet away in the ocean.
No, that
And
did not help. Believe me.
Yeah, I'm like,
And they had coloring books.
and they had coloring books, which, I'm a sucker for coloring books.
How did we get here? How do we get on this?
Well, let's jump into this question.
That's
great
right.
question.
So let's
We-
scrub the voicemail.
This question is actually, we used to answer it a lot at the seminar.
Oh,
We did.
snaps.
Very true.
Snaps. That's
Boom.
what we're talking about. Okay. Let's see. What was the number? Let's just randomly pick a question to answer here. 3549. Here we go.
What's up, Power Athlete Radio? Got a question about 1-rep maxes.
All right.
So, is there some sort of science behind people able to tap into like their ultimate strength to achieve a 1-rep max? I was wondering just because I seem like I'm able to hit 1 reps easier than, say, my girl, but she's able to hit 3, 4, 5 rep maxes all the time. Just wondering if there's anything to it, if it's a mindset thing, or, anything like that. Thanks, guys. Take it easy.
Thank you. Didn't leave a
Caller.
name. Thank you, caller. Good one, John.
Yeah.
So ultimate strength, I don't think is the proper nomenclature.
Yeah, I wrote it down because I've never heard of it as ultimate strength.
But it's not misguided.
No,
right?
but we would use maximal strength.
Right. At maximal maximorium, I believe, is the term.
You are correct from science and practice.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is maximal maximorium of absolute strength.
Yes.
So there's your first little nugget, caller. So next time you don't sound like a dingus, but we love you anyways.
Yeah, we're happy. Leave a good review.
Yeah. Leave us a review. Let's answer this.
One rep maxes are really interesting in that, one, they require you to practice. There's a reason that...
Can we go before that too, John? Like, there's an allure about them as well, right?
Well, it's the idea of like, hey, what can you hit for one big one? I mean, powerlifting, Olympics. I mean, everything that looks like weightlifting involves usually a one rep max outside of, World's Strongest Man, which a lot of times does some one rep maxes. Sure. So there's always been this kind of finite end range, heaviest weight for one big rep is kind of a marker for stuff. And the problem, I think, for most people is... They don't practice the 1RMs because they take a high level of skill and they require an extremely adapted nervous system that's wired up to do it.
Well, here's the thing. Like, let's get some nuance, right? You could do a 1RM.
Yeah.
But is it a 1RM?
Well, we ran into this all the time, and he references his girl, which she handles rep maxes better. And what we found through our own research over the last 10 plus years, and not only the CrossFit Football Power Athlete in the seminar and even at CrossFit Balboa, is that women could handle a higher percentage of their 1RM for more reps.
Right.
We tested this when we did the Hatfield muscle fiber test, where we had them squat a 1RM, cut it to 80%, and did max reps.
Right.
And all of a sudden, if you get under 6 or 7, you're fast twitch. If you get over 7, and we got girls getting in the 20s. Mm-hmm. So what that really kind of made an interesting piece for me. And then obviously hanging out with Louis Simmons, we really got into Prilipin's chart, Prilipin's table, where they show like, hey, if you're going to train at 90%, there's like the max volume, which would be 10, and then there's like optimal, which I think is like 4 reps.
Right.
So I asked Louis about that, and I was like, why is it that if the range is 4 to 7 on the optimal for the 10 reps, like what constitutes a 4 and what constitutes a 7? And he made an interesting point. He said the more adapted and the better, more efficient nervous system needs less volume to get the same amount. So like if somebody's nervous system is extremely heightened, 4 reps. If it's a less heightened nervous system, they would need 7 reps because you're able to do more with less. That's why volume was so important for those guys. There were some key factors for central nervous system efficiency in the lifts came from time under the bar, like how long you've been doing it, and what your androgen profile looked like. The higher the testosterone, the more efficient the nervous system.
Mm-hmm. And I think what's interesting here too is like for a novice lifter, and let's say within a year, do you think a year for 1RMs?
No. So I think a mistake I made, and I think the mistake that a lot of beginners make, is they want to get to 1RMs too soon.
Right. So like that first year though, let's say.
Yeah. Like I mean,
do you think it's still even
maybe
beyond that?
It really depends. Like
True.
We've had people on the linear progression for 3 years and they don't squat 5,000 pounds.
Sure. And I think the like what I'm trying to maybe visualize or help lay out and objectively is like, okay, let's say you have a 1 rep max on a back squat of 225 pounds. Right? Like that's what you think your 1RM is. But maybe you can do 235 for 1, and maybe you can do 210, but only for 1. So like there's this interesting gap of 25 pounds that you can only do for 1. That would be an indicator that you're relatively untrained, right?
Maybe.
Whereas a trained athlete has a much more narrower margin
the margin
for
of error.
Hitting a single with it. And I should also say not competition either.
Sure.
Like a training max.
Well, the thing which is also really interesting is you can almost, and we saw this all the time at the seminar, I could tell based upon how the reps looked over the course of 3 reps, how beginner or advanced somebody was.
Right.
If I ask you to squat a heavy 3RM and the first rep looks really good, and then I see deterioration in 2 and 3, I realize that individual is pretty well adapted and probably on this side of the house. What I found too with beginners and people that were not as proficient, the first rep, Second rep, and then the third one was actually looked pretty good. So based upon the quality of movement, whether it's front or back, really allowed us to kind of understand where you were as a trained individual.
And you'll even I think people would notice that after, let's say even experienced lifters, after you go on vacation or something, right? And you come in, you're squatting heavy for the first time. You're like, holy shit, this 4 and 5 felt really good, but 1, 2, 3 were a little shaky. Whereas if you have that regular exposure and you're switched on, movement dialed in, nervous system's pumping, you're recovering, and you're training, you're going to see the inverse, right? And it's just as maybe potentially as people are listening. But Tex, what do you got on your notes here?
Plenty. Just aiming to build. I want to focus on a key term that is very popular in strength and conditioning: training age. And our experience all as high school athletes was the 1RM within the weight room.
Sure.
And that is a huge fault from the coaches. And we know that because John mentioned the androgen profile. These high school boys are testosterone's up, down, and around all over the place. So if they are executing a 1RM, it's the most weight they can lift at that moment in time on that day. And then the fallacy is one fallacy is doing the 1RM. 2 is then building a strength program
around it, right?
Around that, and based off percentages, you are potentially stifling that kid's potential based off of giving them that percentage-based program,
right,
versus a linear progression at that time and age. The second, and I want to get into, is the technique. So not only your central nervous system alone, and John said you need reps, there is a technique, you have to have it dialed in, that allows the expression of that central nervous system. And these kids within the high school, their warm-up set looks different from set 2 with a lightweight.
Feet look different all the time.
Different from a medium weight, and so on and so forth. And an observation that John's expressed when he went to visit Kaz and the Baylor Bears is he could tell these novice, even though these kids were amazing college football player athletes, he could tell the ones that were novice lifters versus the ones that were more experienced just by the almost like their patterning. They're getting in the zone as they grab the bar,
get under the bar,
place their feet, place it, and knock it out, versus a different almost. I'm going to reference baseball players, right? You get an MLB. You got your setting of your gloves, your pattern. Basketball players have their, all right, I'm going to bounce it 1, 2, 3, and then set up and shoot. Same with the barbell and the back squat, bench press, all of it.
No, you can see somebody when they go take the weight out, everything they do, they put, everything becomes very automatic. And when I see, which should be advanced lifters, but guys that are in college, get underneath the bar, don't get feet underneath them, try to lunge it out, and then take 5 steps to the back of the rack. I'm like, you don't do this very much. Because if you squatted heavy weight, you would know you got to bilaterally stand up with it, and then you take just a big enough step backwards to where when I get to the top, I can pretty much lunge this thing in if I have to. Obviously, you never want to do it because it's a bad habit to get in. But it's really interesting to see how somebody arranges themselves and how they move within underweight and the setup, and to the point where people are superstitious, rotate the plates this way. I mean, that the more I see that, and then especially when you see somebody when they come out, you'll see people kind of move their foot, and as long as it always looks the same, your warm up looks the same, I know that you have a high level of proficiency. When everything is different, we know that you're relatively new to this, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the only way that you're going to master a 1RM is by actually taking some 1RMs. But the problem is that 1RMs are not the best, most efficient way to build strength.
No,
they're a great strength tester. But if you follow some of the power athlete programs, you'll see that templates I use in Hammer and Johnny Watt and some of the others and Jack Street and Field Strong are really based off of this power athlete template that uses 5s, triples, and singles for rep maxes, and then takes that percentage for the cat work. So it ends up being 66% of the reps are in that 3s and 5s, and we have a third of the reps, which obviously is somewhere around 5. I mean, if you think about arrangement, not necessarily in volume, it's much lower. It's almost 90-10, but we have to really look at what builds our strength. But you still have to train 1RMs because of the central nervous system efficiency, and you have to get used to it. So I like to train those, and then I like to do singles with the cat work so that people can actually get some volume at a lighter weight, working on compensatory acceleration, being able to move. So it's pretty interesting. Sorry guys. I got something in my throat. I observed a long time ago that I thought Olympic weightlifting wasn't the best way to get strong. I thought it was a great displayer of strength, but in terms of like getting strong, I think that a lot of the accessory movements, the back squat, and a lot of things that the lifters are using are helpful to getting them to that position. And I think a lot of times when you start looking at like just doing max singles all the time, a lot of that comes down to a lot of technique work, understanding the groove, but not necessarily the best way to continue to drive your strength.
And testing a few times within the year and taking your shots. So determining when you're going to test. So if I'm a Globo gym bro, I'm not going in every time to build 1RMs to get strong. So it's being on that consistent program. And then where John mentioned percentages, those are based off 5s, 3s, and 1s within a week or so, that then you backfill to get the volume and the opportunity to move fast with the cat. Where I mentioned earlier, high school student using percentages, and that's a fallacy of using that program. These are almost two different age groups.
Right.
And why
Experience level, training
percentage can be a great tool for a more trained athlete, like the people following Hammer, and then the people on Bedrock, we're not going to ever test once.
What I always liked about Jim Wendler's 531 program was the fact like, hey, I'm going to set these percentages. We're going to kind of make them low, and we're going to work up to some final max rep set. Like, hey, you're 85 plus. You're going to put this weight on the bar, and you're going to squat it for max reps. And that fits within the progressive overload model, where you're using percentages, but by doing a max rep set, you can potentially overreach, which is what you kind of want to do. But then also once you hit a certain rep, like I remember seeing people like, on my final set of 531, I was able to get 18 reps. And I'm like, well, dude, the weight's not heavy enough.
Yeah.
And then where people really messed up is that they were not necessarily, periodizing the weights up, like they weren't handling. And Jim's deal was like, you'll eventually get there. That's what I liked about the linear progression and some of the rep maxes was I need you to lift the 5 heaviest reps you did today. All right. I know what you hit last week. If you can hit a PR, let's hit a PR. But be realistic. I would say for an advanced athlete, if you can hit 3 to 4 PRs, which would be really just like maybe one PR every training cycle, like whether it be a squat here, like I'm totally happy as long as you're PRing. Like I got an email the other day or yesterday from a guy who was like, I haven't PR'd my deadlift in over 4 years. I've been on Hammer this is the second cycle, and I've been PRing all of my lifts. So his thing was like, why? And I'm like, well, I mean, how we're arranging the volume, the aerobic, all the other key factors. But at the end of the day, maybe the training is working in such a way that it's allowing you to handle this volume, whereas what you're doing before was crushing you. So I think there's a skill acquisition in terms of lifting 1RMs.
Well, yeah, and it's not only like physiological, John, it's like psychological too.
I have to build off that. One of the last episodes, we talked about the metabolic circuit. And I dug into some Boyd Epley writing back, and I found a term that I've already fallen in love with here, the psychological overtraining.
All right.
So the freshman that he had, and this was a discovery period of 15 years, and I got a blog out with a little bit about the history of Boyd's finding. Over 15 years, he was trying to find the appropriate rest and so on and so forth, and he didn't allow his freshman athletes to participate in the Nebraska circuit. The reason being that he wanted to dial in their lifting technique before taking on the metabolic circuit. And he also, the intensity of the circuit, I guess with all the rowdiness and the football players in there, it resulted in psychological overtraining. The psyche required to withstand the pain that's incurred during the circuit. This is now a direct quote. Younger lifters take notice more advanced lifters doing the circuit and may want to do it themselves. By making them wait 1 to 2 years ensures a greater effort when the time comes to do the circuit. The circuit works best when extreme effort is used. The effort must be tempered with patience. So if we reference back to the high schoolers mentioned earlier, all right, maybe your seniors, if you have your kids working through a true strength and conditioning program at that level, can hit their ones. Awesome. Let your freshmen see that in the intensity in 10 cities, but we're not going to allow them to do the 1RMs. They're going to go through their full bedrock resets. And then the next year, again, when they're sophomores and grow 6 inches and they're a completely different human being, guess we're going to do again, bedrock again.
Right.
Because they're a different person and they need to coordinate and dial in the structure and the neurological efficiency, proficiency with their new body.
Right.
And new muscle that they start to gain. So
for listeners, go to episode 412 if you haven't already.
Yeah.
And that's what Tex is talking about.
The
with
metabolic
AMC,
circuit, yeah.
metabolic circuit, and Boyd Upley.
Yeah. I do like that. The psychological, I mean, we always called it psychological overreaching. Yeah. Like the idea that the anticipation or like the mental stress that you put yourself in anticipation of doing this can sometimes be extremely, just debilitating for people. Whereas if you've been through it before and you've been in high stress situations, you can almost get into I think what's pretty interesting, and I've seen this many times, is all of a sudden you watch somebody train, they're pretty consistent, all of a sudden they get up to 1RM, and next thing you know, they're like howling at the moon, want to do some like funky thing. Like I watched Nate do this. He's like, all of a sudden I'm like, hey man, like, do everything like you do everything. Like, don't change anything just because the weight gets heavier. Like, still take the same approach, same mental. The age-old, Fred Hatfield. Lift 500 like it's 135, and 135 like it's 500. Like, approach it in that same mindset. And but like we saw people do this on game day. All of a sudden, they want to put on a special belt and do this. I'm like, no, dude. You go in the exact same way, and just like the other one, the Bulgarians talked a lot about. Was that idea of like low heart rate, that they found that an elevated heart rate from competition.
Overexcited, right?
Yeah, overexcited I think could have been it. They said that it was good for like 8 to 10%. But the problem is if they tapped into that in training, then they didn't have the fact, like if they were in there, popping, a ephedrine and, like getting all juiced up and like going into that, like, you see these dudes taking pre-workout all the time. If you train in that, when all of a sudden you need it in competition, you don't have that extra gear. So the idea is that you had to train in this relatively calm state so that when you went to competition and got into an excited state, you could expect that gain.
Right.
So like I think I've thought about that for years with my own training. Like, don't get too high, don't get too low, just get in there and do the work. And then when it becomes important, then you know what, like let's, turn up the music and, watch the program and,
plays at the table.
Yeah, and then get excited and go out and smash it. So
another thing to think about.
I think it's called excitability.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah.
Another thing to think about, like, okay, so I want to get into eventually why even like, okay, you're not a football player, you're not a strength coach, you're John or Jane who's just banging weights in their garage. Why would you even do a single? But before we get there, if this single is important to you, even as an enthusiast, you just train in your garage. But if this then you understand how your training could be affecting that, right? Like, not to bash on CrossFit, but certain applications of CrossFit. If you're doing high volume, sub-maximal efforts through these movement patterns, you can expect that high volume, sub-maximal, repeated effort week after week, month after month, day after day,
year after year, decade after decade,
to negatively affect your ability to express a 1RM, right? And that's that type 2A.
Well, the reason
muscle
being,
fiber conversion.
We talked about the conversion of fast twitch muscle fibers to slow twitch muscle fibers. Yeah, the schizophrenic ones that'll go either way. The conversion of those fast twitch muscle fibers to slow twitch to be able to handle the load. Mm-hmm. And what do you need to effectively hit a heavy 1RM?
Fast.
You need a ton of those fast motor units firing in unison fiber type.
So on that note too, like I'm not gonna text. Maybe you can narrow this down for me. But even genetically, when we're born, the musculature that we use to squat, if we're talking about squat 1RM or a bench 1RM, between all of us, we have different densities of fast twitch muscle fibers. Sure. So yes, there is like a genetic propensity and there's a physiological component to being an effective, effective at lifting 1RMs, right? So that could be an issue for you. Number two could be the training that you've been doing is high volume, submaximal, and effort, kind of like traditional, like burn me down CrossFit. Now there's good, like CrossFit's fine in other modalities and can be effective with certain guardrails, i.e. CrossFit football. Number three could also be, let's say you're an adult now who wants to bang some serious weights, but you were the guy or gal who decided to sign up for the cross-country team in junior high school. And then you had a 6, 7, 8 year stint of being a cross-country athlete. Well, in your formative years, you programmed yourself to be a shitty 1RM lifter. Now, that's not to say that you're shit out of
base
luck.
level of conditioning.
But you've certainly lowered that ceiling. Like
and you haven't developed the metabolic pathways that are necessary to really be in it. And we've seen it, like people coming in and at age 30 something, they want to start lifting heavy weights, but I have this whole, LSD endurance background. That has been a harder application than people that came from doing something explosive and dynamic.
Right.
Maybe went away. So, I mean, it really comes down to what you do earlier in life. I mean, we've always said, the training you do earliest in life sets patterns for the rest of your life.
Right. And the hardware you're packing, which you talked about a little earlier with ladies, is like, so there is a specific fiber type distribution and androgen profile and level of experience, opportunity, training age that all kind of cross and weave into whether or not you'll be effective at singles. And the mental, right? So if you're a lady, don't expect a similar performance because just the androgen profile in general.
Sure.
Right.
Well, obviously men make testosterone in two places, in the adrenals and also in the testes. Women make it in one place with the adrenals. So it would just naturally be assuming that men would make more. The other pretty fascinating thing is the idea of the training effect. What are you doing? What are you training? And you brought it up, hey, why does this person want to go do one of these 1RMs? Where do they fit within the training paradigm? When we do it, it's more because I need to get people, it's just part of the strength cycle and I want people to get used to it. But I mean, even, and the other big argument, people be like, oh, the Westside guys do majority of singles, but look how much special exercises and accessories that they're doing to build their volume. They're not necessarily building their volume and their strength as much in the testing of their kind of 1 rep maxes and kind of the conjugate system, but really in the special exercise and the volume and all the accessory that they're doing is what builds that big piece. So, I mean, but they're also training in a very specific,
tip of the spear, very narrow lane.
Well, for a sport, hey, this is our 1RM, it's geared, I mean, the whole deal. So, if you look at the really strong individuals, very, very strong individuals that are out there in raw lifting, they do some form, you will look at Dan Green, he's lifting, 5s, 3s, 7s, 8s. I mean, he's lifting heavy weights for a ton of reps. And, there's a definite programming, if you were to look at if we were to aggregate out all of the sets and reps and percentages, it's really about 85 to 90% of the volume really comes in those, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, and 7s. Really 1s and 2s fall maybe 10, 15% at most. So, but then if you look at sprinting on the other side, and this is why I always say sprinting, the limiting factor for sprinting isn't always strength, because the way sprinting is built is a little bit different. If you follow Charlie Francis stuff, you got to be able to run fast to get fast, and training in that kind of 80% slower deal actually decreases that top 1RM speed. So that's central nervous system efficiency.
I guess
why do it as a joke? I think learn something about yourself.
Yeah, but you can. Great. And maybe this is bias. Maybe there is some science to back this, but you want to the heaviest triple will do that to you. You know what I mean? Taking a heavy load for a ride, trying to go for 3, and then ultimately failing at 2, I think is just as miserable as a single. But I feel like the single is an ego pack lift, right? With the exception of training for doing a single for your sport. But if you're just a dude or chick who's lifting weights and does want to express their absolute strength, a triple is just as you'll learn just as much as about yourself, right?
Well, what's the goal? Are you testing or are you training? I remember, years ago when I was another Westside deal, Louis and I were talking about deficit deadlifts, and he's like, hey, we found that, if you can deficit deadlift this, then this is what your 1RM, right? So they had these kind of all these equations.
Yeah, beautiful mind.
And so I asked him, because I think I pulled something pretty good. It was like a 545 for a set of 6 or 7 off of off of the tall box, the 4. And I hit Louis up and I was like, man, I hit this. What do you think my 1RM deadlift was? And he's like, you got to go fucking take your 1RM deadlift. And I was like, but I thought you had this equation. And he's like, no. There's no fucking equation. If you can do this for this, you have to test your 1RM deadlift so that next time you go do those elevated deficit deadlift box, what if you get 8 reps? Then you go back and test your deadlift, and if it went up, then you know that that's
so you're building your individual correlative.
Then that's a movement
matrix
that allows you to lift heavier in these base movements. So when we look at a lot of this accessory stuff and kind of the conjugate, and we do a little bit of variety, like, hey, we're going to pull from different levels and kind of move through it. The idea is that you're developing strength in these different either advantages or deficits,
right?
Like whether it's like a rack pull versus a deficit deadlift. We do it with the squat, with a safety bar. There's different ways to create an extra layer of deficit, and there's also a way to create an extra layer of advantage,
right?
So that you can overload. Like if my deadlift's stuck at 500 and I do trap pulls with 600 pounds, all of a sudden now my central nervous system and the hands and everything start prepping for that 600,
right?
And those, and that's how you kind of overreach,
right? So
and then
the essence of like the conjugate system,
and like that idea, and I think there's a little bit of modification in that, but the thing where people forget is that a lot of those special exercises and those kind of builders have to be done in rep ranges that allow me to fucking be able to push past what I thought was possible.
At a point in your training life cycle where accommodation has set in, and you no longer are adapting to the foundational versions of those.
Yeah.
But we do a good job of avoiding accommodation.
That's right.
Well, yes. And to the Joe, where you asked, you get the same mental challenge, and then I'm sure the bio-release benefits, testosterone, all that good stuff from a 3RM and failing at 2. That's a good thing. I would also say if the 1 or the 3 or the 5, all of those reps look the same. Going back to what we mentioned earlier. If you're fighting for 3RM, we want rep 1 and rep 3
to look. Now, speed might vary, but
correct
position, posture.
So we're using that weight from the 1s, the 3s, and the 5s, the true rep maxes here to challenge your technique, not change it. So if I am a Joe and I put on a weight that it doesn't look like the previous 1RM attempt, or it doesn't look like my last week's 3RM before I'm hitting my 1 within my program, we are now ingraining a poor movement pattern because your central nervous system is going to remember that last rep that
it's also the most stressful. It's also the most stressful, so there becomes the most crystallized.
That's what different way of what I was saying. It becomes the way now that your body moves, so it's finding that compensation pattern to move the most amount of stress, which
kind of like the Mandalorian. This is the way.
I thought
Gina Carano. That's all. You say Mandalorian. I black out for 5 minutes to think about my girlfriend, but
I was thinking of The Way You Move, which is a song, isn't it?
The way of the gun.
I want to move it, whatever. So going back, one thing I missed on, I kind of cascaded and summarized androgen profile, experience, all these factors. Another one in terms of being an effective at a lift is anthropometrics.
Yeah.
Right. So just your body type, your fiber distribution, all of those things. So to answer our homie's question, the caller's question is in terms of the individual, there is a little bit of some of it's nature, some of it's nurture, and those things kind of come together. But at the end of the day, what's going to make you an effective lifter in terms of expressing a single is opportunity and time under the bar, and a strength program and conditioning program that is facilitated and geared towards that. But also number 2 is for a single to be an effective training tool, right? Because training versus testing, because there is efficacy of using 1RMs in terms of driving a training response. All those things still align, right? Your training has to facilitate the 1RM efforts, and those efforts have to be timed in a manner that would give you a positive stress response to continue that adaptation. The example, I guess, there is if you're just using singles for training and all your other training looks like high volume shit, that single won't be an effective training tool because you're not going to be trained enough to handle the load, to drive the stress, to get the training response. So you're just wasting your time.
Well, I remember when we were talking with Bill Kazmaier at Summer Strong, we were talking about, just wanted to chew his ear a little bit about training. And he was a 5 sets of 10 guy on all his bodybuilding stuff.
And if you don't know who Bill Kazmaier is,
So
Get on YouTube and
like
Google.
he did like, you know, he was heavy tens. Like he did like, I mean, something crazy. It was like 585 for a set of 10 on the bench. And I asked him about that. And I was like, you know, the majority of your training was just kind of like higher rep range, higher volume. And he's like, yeah, that's where we built the strength. But he goes, you know, at some point we would have to start hitting some heavy singles to prepare. But he's like, but I never really I never handled the poundage in training that I did in the contest because my body was ready. And so there was like some technique work. I mean, like we were talking about with, you remember our talk with Fred Hatfield, him talking about, you know, he was able to move, like he had that torquemeter where he moved 800 pounds as if it was like 1,200 pounds. And based off of those numbers and how fast he was moving that weight, he never had to put 1,200 pounds on the bark, but he knew he could do it. And then he goes in and he crushes his squat and, you know, sets that record. So I think there's a really interesting thing. And even when I program, you know, some of the power athlete stuff with singles, I'm like, hey, these just need to be fast singles. I don't want them to be grindy. I don't want them to be slow. Like I need them to be heavy, but I need them to be competent. And I need like a high level of connectivity and just expression of good movement. Like if they look like my fucking back is breaking, the knees are caving, and I'm dog shitting a razor blade, like that wasn't the message. And more importantly, if that's the case, you're going too heavy because we need the replication of the movement and the patterning and all the other stuff. So
any other final notes here, McQuilkin?
No, I'll just end with the challenge technique. Don't change technique. Film yourself, drop your film into the Train Heroic feed and get feedback from our coaches.
We'll jump on in.
Is feedback from coaches called coaching?
It depends. How close to the movement is it provided?
I wonder if we could open something up where, you know, like for example, people could almost book online sessions where, you know, we could coach them in real time or they could send us some stuff. I know we do some
interesting idea.
I know we do some remote coaching, but as we've been, you know, I mean, we have thousands of people doing these programs and we get loaded with a ton of content. I get hit on social media, on Instagram. People load it direct to the Train Heroic. And I almost feel like if those were live, I could make the correction. Like I want to like yell at him and be like, man, I wish this was live so I could get you to make this correction, because if you made this correction, I think you would do better. Like I was.
But we need a way to connect with them over video.
Like Zoom?
Oh, they do have that, don't they? What about audio?
So they have it on the phone. So like you could like, let's say you booked.
Are you suggesting we need to indoctrinate these people?
No, but think about this, right? Like what if somebody comes on and is like, hey, John, I want to buy a 5-pack with you to like help you coach some of my lifts. Like we're going to work on the back squat. I'd be like, great. All right. Film me your back squat. Like send it to me. Let me look at it. And then I want you to warm up, go through everything. You know, cue me in as soon as you get into your working sets, and I'm going to sit there. I'm going to coach you through it, help you get to what you need, make some changes. Hey, that looked pretty good. Give you a little bit of encouragement, and then leave there with like, hey, based on what I saw, this is what I think you need for some of your special exercises, maybe some accessory. This is a way you can fix it. I want you to, here's your homework. 2 weeks from now, we're going to book another session and we're going to do this again with another lift, or if you want to keep working on this lift. And I really think, like, based off of watching all of this video on Train Heroic, you know, on you know, the programs, like if we could interject in real time, man, I think we could really solve a lot of problems.
That sounds interesting.
And especially in this COVID environment where people aren't going to be able to fly to Power Athlete or we're not out traveling, you know, I think it really makes, like, you know, Harry Heppenstall's in, you know, Manchester training and he cues us in and is like, hey, I'm having problems with this. I mean, it's so much easier than him sending me a video and then a week later trying to circle back and how was it and film it again. Man, like I really think that there's there could be
real-time intervention.
Man,
what a wild, crazy idea.
I know nobody's talking about it, and we really haven't seen it. I mean, I guess we have a little bit with like the Peloton and like the mirror and all
that's
that.
just like hot people doing exercise in front of you to motivate you. So that's motivation, which is important.
If we could,
but not entirely.
If we could mobilize this Power Athlete Block 1 nation of these hundreds of coaches that we've put our hands on, worked through, and even indoctrinated, and then, you know,
they're indoctrinated.
You know, the cast of miscreants that I'm sitting here at the table with. You don't even know what a miscreant is.
It sounds delightful.
Yeah, but
I'll take 2.
The idea of taking somebody on a journey and helping them get to where they want, like the fact that we could hack through that a little bit and some of that and be like in real time, like, hey, I mean, just like, you know, years ago, actually here in Austin, when I taught a seminar for CrossFit football, this dude showed up with his girl who showed up specifically because he couldn't squat without knee pain. And I was like his last hope. Within like 2 sets, we fixed his knee pain. And then it was hilarious. I saw him like 5 years later at like the CrossFit Games or somewhere. He sent an email and he's like, knees still don't hurt. He's like, I paid all these people, went and did all this stuff. And he goes, showing up to CrossFit Football Seminar fixed my knees. Like to be able to like have that situation where we could interject and like, be an agent of change at the right moment. Man, that seems like a fucking home run.
I don't think people want it. I think they don't want that. But maybe I'm wrong, listeners. If you think this is a good idea, let us know. Text us 929-464-4640 and say you want in. Because here's the problem,
It's
John.
Spontaneous magic, man.
They got pain or they want gains. So like either way, we're their people.
Well, I mean, I think if you have injuries and you're working through some stuff, I think we have an incredible group of practitioners we work with to help you get out of pain. I think if your goal is to get really strong and to be real proficient in the lifts, I think something like that will be another piece of evolution. Like as the amount of remote coaching I've done and consults, like it's always been this kind of video after the fact, this AAR after the fact, where I'm trying to give them, hey, work on this next time, video it and send it to me. And I always thought like, man, I wish there was a medium to be able to do this in real time.
There is. And we've, spoiler alert, folks, we may have been experimenting with this. And yeah, it's totally effective and it works. And it's the best thing you got. It's the next best thing you got, especially if you're in some remote area with a bunch of donkey coaches around you. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are gauging.
Don't trust your high school coaches.
No, but like if a dude's training in his garage and is like, man, I don't have a mirror. My wife's not really giving me any good cues other than like, don't die.
Oh my God.
Like something like this, man, would be really, really amazing.
So if you're interested, want to be a little part of the pilot that we're going to be launching here shortly, hit us up, 929-464-4640. You got to text us. You got to text us and let us know. It's the only way to get in because we're only layering it out to our most loyal Power Athlete listeners.
I am Power Athlete.
And if you have a question and you're looking for answers, like our caller today about what the heck's the deal with the 1RM stuff, give us a call and leave us a message. Or I guess you could text that same number, 929-464-4640, 929-ING-ING-0. That's right. Because the hotline is open and we are baking brownies and we're ready to serve them. Knowledge
that sounds
brownies.
awkward. That sounds weird.
Stick with the initiation talk.
Yeah.
We're
blindfolded.
No, we want to.
Blindfolded.
You want to initiate. I just want to indoctrinate.
No, wait. I thought.
And Luke wants to make them brownies.
Yeah, I'll
weird.
bake you brownies, baby. Banana bread's hot. Let's go.
We do have the recipe by Sam Flaherty.
I know. It's beautiful.
On PowerAthleteHQ.com.
But
Awesome.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening. Until next time. Bye.
Now it's time for you to empower your performance. Head to powerathletehq.com/training to choose from a number of programs to meet your specific performance goals. And if you like to break a mental sweat too, visit academy.powerathletehq.com and become a real stakeholder in you or your athlete's success. Until next time, bye!